members here. Board Member Metcher is in the building. Will be on the dais shortly. Board President Tevilder and Jeswin will not be here at open session tonight, so I will be your substitute. We open with our Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Mock, have you led us in the pledge yet? In your new role, please. And the filmmaker in me has to point out the great zoom out that the camera did on the flag during that. So kudos. I'm like, I've never noticed that before. Like, well played. All right, so we have approval of the agenda. We are pulling one item. We're pulling item 6A4. That item will be on our December 12th agenda. Other than that, does anybody have anything else they would like to have pulled from the agenda? Anything changes? Okay, then. Did I do that too early? Okay, great. So anybody want to approve the agenda with that one item pulled? Motion by Maria, second by Lori. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So the agenda is approved unanimously. Approval of minutes. I would like to add one thing into the minutes. Our last meeting was in Malibu. And we opened the meeting in honor of Phil Cott, a longtime educator in Malibu, who has made just a tremendous impact, not just the schools in Malibu, but the schools in our district. Just a fine example of an educator. And we wanted to let Phil and his family know that we on the board were thinking of him and appreciate everything that he's done. We want to make it sure that the minutes reflect our appreciation of his service and that we open in honor of him. So other than that, are there any changes to the minutes?
There's one thing, Sarah. I think you put my arrival time against Ralph's name because Maria and I both came in at the same time. And Ralph was there because it shows his votes. So just switch the arrived at whatever time up to me, please.
Anybody else? Motion to approve by Craig, second by Oscar. All in favor of approving the minutes as submitted?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So the minutes are unanimously approved, which brings us to the commendations, recognitions, the Golden Sneaker Award. I will introduce Gail Pinsker. I will not introduce Gail Pinsker. Huh?
Hello? Hello. All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Corey Keene. I work for the City of Santa Monica in the Mobility Division. I run a program called Safe Routes to School. And as you guys know, we do a biannual Bike It, Walk It celebration. So we encourage kids to ride their bikes and walk or skateboard, scooter, take transit, just get parents and the kids out of the cars in the morning to help alleviate some congestion, get them active, fight childhood obesity, get them to school healthy, happy, ready to learn. And we make a friendly competition. We get parent volunteers at each of the schools to lead the effort. Usually it's PTA members. And then this time around for fall, we had the highest participation that we've actually ever seen. We had 87% of the grant student body utilizing non-motorized transportation to get to school. So the second highest ever in all the years we've been doing this was, I believe, McKinley. They got like 84%. So, I mean, that's exponentially high, and there's not really too much more room for improvement. And they are now the 3-time reigning champions. So I'm going to introduce Susanna Landries, and she's going to say a few words. She is the parent volunteer who helped organize all the student council and all the parent volunteers and helping passing out healthy snacks and stickers and promotional items and getting the word out and working with the principal. So she is a big part of this thing for Grant.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to say how excited we all are and the numbers from our school of students and parents do not reflect the enthusiasm behind it. And I also want to mention that there are three things that contributed to our success, and it's the incredible support that we've been getting from the city, Colleen, Corey, and also from our school leadership. We have been feeling very, very supported by our principal and by our staff. So it's clear that it's a school-wide priority. And also, I want to say that part of our success is being part of the neighborhood and the community that we're lucky enough to be part of, because they are incredibly supportive and they understand that safe roads to school are and should be on everybody's mind, and I think the numbers reflect that. So thank you very much, and we're very excited to be here.
And then don't go just yet. So we always present the Golden Sneaker Award. So anyone from Grant, and including Principal Fear, please come up. So they are now holding on to the Golden Sneaker for the third time around. Whoever is the winner passes it on to the next school. And then we also have a big, fun novelty check.
Can we cash it?
Yes. So that goes to their PTA, little donation for the efforts. And yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. I probably should have reported that we have nothing to report out from closed session. Sarah? Okay, so there's nothing to report out from closed session. Which takes us to our superintendent's report. Dr. Drotti.
Yeah, I'll keep it very short. This is just more or less a reminder to the community that I will be attending every school site's PTA sometime during this year, actually started yesterday at Grant, but I'm going through making my rounds at every school's PTA to talk about the fiscal health of the district. There's some things that we're going to try to do with the direction we're headed in education, and obviously our fiscal situation is imperative in that direction. So this is a message to all parents out there. If you want to learn more about that, please talk to your principal. And they'll be able to inform you where I'll be and what day. I'm also making the same journey of every school site's faculty. So for the teachers, classified staff, certificate administration, also talk to your principal about when I'm coming to your site to talk about the same situation. Thank you, and that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, Dr. Drotti. And just an observation, it sounds like they've fixed the sound on the microphones a little bit, so they are very sensitive. So give yourself a little space from the mic.
Is that too loud?
No, but it definitely got fixed between the past two meetings, so we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. All of us are here together. Consent calendar. Does anybody need to pull anything from consent?
I have a tweak. My day for trivia. On the 2022-23 calendar, it shows, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but it shows on the 19th of December that it's a school holiday. It's a box with a line through it. and I don't think it's a school holiday. I can't imagine what the 19th of December would be. The 23rd and the 30th are on the...
But Craig, that's a major action item, I think.
No, the calendar is
Adoption
on
of
consent.
calendars? What? It's under major
Oh,
action.
never
item.
mind. Sorry.
But that's a good preview.
Okay, good. Never mind.
Thank you, because I didn't see that. Anybody else have anything from consent, Maria?
Okay. Well, just under purchase orders, there's two items. I don't know whether just the fact that they're made payable to Santa Monica College. One under PO 2W64980, which is for the Santa Monica football game reservations, and I'm sure it's for the use of the SMC field. Abstain, yeah. So you want to pull it out? Oh, you want me, because there's two Santa Monica College. Okay, all right. So I'm going to, step out because of the two, bookstore and then SMC.
Does
Right.
anybody else have any items, or can we, because if not, we can just present consent and you can just abstain from consent, and we don't have to worry about pulling anything. Anybody else have anything on consent? So does anyone want to move to accept consent as submitted? So Craig, seconded by Lori. And then, so this is roll call, right? I should know this by now. Ms. Ashar?
Yes.
Mr. Metcher?
Yes.
Ms. Lan Vasquez?
Abstention.
Thank you. Ms. Lieberman?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. De La Torre?
Yes.
And I am a yes, so that is 5 yeses and 1 abstention for consent. You're very welcome. Which brings us to discussion items. Santa Monica Education Foundation quarterly report. Is that Linda or Rachel? There's no one here yet. So no one's here yet? Okay, can we come back to that? We'll come back to that. Major action items. Adopt resolution, National Inclusive Schools Week. And this, oh, Sarah, you told me something about this. Dr. Mora? Dr. Benjamin? Dr. Ashley Benjamin will present to us. Oh, that's right. Thank you. Dr. Benjamin? Okay, great. Dr. Mora?
Good evening, board members, Dr. Drati, cabinet, and guests. It is a pleasure for me to be able to introduce Dr. Ashley Benjamin, our principal of McKinley Elementary, who will be showcasing her school's work around inclusive spaces and climates and environments. So I would like to invite her to come up to the podium.
Okay, hello, I'm Dr. Benjamin, principal at McKinley. Excited to be here for the National Inclusion Schools Week resolution and to share with you all how McKinley fosters the inclusion of students with special needs. Let's see if, oh. Sure. Okay. So at McKinley, we have our school philosophy, which is the PRIDE philosophy, and the D stands for diversity. So we're very lucky to have a diverse student population. We have 22 different languages spoken, students of numerous different religions, backgrounds, races, ethnicities, and needs. So students learn from their very first day at McKinley that diversity isn't just something that we accept, it's something that we value, and students learn that they get to learn from each other. So part of the diversity that we value at McKinley is our students with special needs. We're home to 2 special education programs, both of which promote inclusion. So first is our preschool collaborative program, and this class is a smaller general education class that has both students in general ed and students with IEPs. And then there's a general ed teacher and a special ed teacher that co-teach together, and service providers go into the classroom to provide their services. So the students get to learn from each other and collaborate with each other. We also have a K through 5 life skills class. So while this is a special day class, our students are mainstream throughout the day, so they get to have learning and experiences with their general ed peers. We also have approximately 12% of our student population with IEPs. So these students have various needs and services. Sometimes they're pulled out or pushed in with our psych and our SAI, OTPT, and speech. So our overall student community is very aware that students have different needs and get different services and are used to that, so they're very supportive of each other. Some general things we do at McKinley to promote inclusion school-wide is we utilize diverse literature. For example, we have a school-wide shared reading experience where every month all the students read the same book on that month's pillar of character. And we specifically select books that reflect our diverse population. So last year, one of our books was called Be Good to Eddie Lee, which was about a character who had special needs. Our strategies and our positive behavior intervention support program, or discipline plan, also promote inclusion. For example, our teachers utilize responsive classroom techniques, restorative justice. Over 90% of our teachers were voluntarily trained in that, as is all of our classified staff. We do mindfulness, and we have 9 teachers that did additional certification in mindfulness. We use the second step social skills curriculum, and last year we had 2nd and 5th grade piloted. This year we're school-wide, and we use the Olveus anti-bullying program. So during morning community meetings and during explicit lessons, our teachers and students get to discuss and promote inclusion. We also utilize a variety of adaptive equipment, so students with special needs can be with their peers. We actually have an adaptive inclusive swing on our playground, so students in wheelchairs can play at recess. We also have a OT and PT room full of equipment such as trampolines and a swing and rollers. And then our OT provides equipment to classrooms and general ed, so things like wiggle seats and slant boards. At McKinley, we also promote family engagement of parents of students with special needs. So 2.5 years ago when I started at McKinley, I actually created a special ed parent resource group, and it's become a very active group, and we just had our meeting last week, and our whole special ed team had a Q&A with them, which was great. And then also something new at McKinley this year is we're now a deep learning school, and we're doing grade level global citizenship service learning projects, and our 4th grade theme for their project is inclusion. And before I go more into depth in that, I'm just going to give you a real quick background and context of what deep learning is. So deep learning is essentially an experience that helps students be good at academics and be good at life. So with grade level service learning projects, students are going to be given a real world problem or issue and asked to collaborate to help solve it. So they're going to be doing math, science, social studies, reading, writing, all while also learning how to be global citizens and good people. So they will help develop these 6 global competencies, and the projects will utilize different learning environments, different pedagogical practices, different learning partnerships, and then different digital technology. So overall, students are going to learn how to contribute to the common good, address global challenges, and how to flourish in turbulent and complex times. So we're helping them to become those problem solvers we need in the future. So far, each grade level has an initial project. As I mentioned, 4th grade's doing inclusion, which I'll talk about in a moment. TK and kindergarten are focusing on kindness, and will help the school and community and the world through shared literature, visiting community helpers like firemen and police, creating cards for people at the pier, the 3rd Street Promenade, to spread peace and love, and reading to shelter dogs. For 1st grade, students are going to research sea animals and see how they can help protect the environment and reduce pollution and trash to help our animal friends. And in 2nd grade, students are going to deepen their understanding of the plight of bees and figure out how they can help them and take action. And 3rd grade is partnered with UNICEF to help refugees in different parts of the world. And 5th grade, students will determine ways to help the homeless. So they've already partnered with Path Partners, an organization in downtown LA, and we're actually having a visit from the LA Superior Court Judge Craig Marshall, who has a movie coming out about his Skid Row marathons and running club. So for our 4th grade deep learning project on inclusion, students will learn about how they can promote and facilitate inclusion in the community and the world. So they will be reading diverse literature on the topic, research and learning about different laws and events and history related to special education and inclusion. Some families are going to do a family interview project where students interview family members to get their perspective about inclusion over time and in different parts of the world. Students may use math and art to design their own inclusive playground, and we have a parent who is an architect who is going to come in and show them how to design a blueprint. We also have a 3D printer, so our STEM teacher is going to help students to design and create artificial limbs or pieces for equipment to help students with physical needs. And fourth graders will get a chance to take a field trip to an inclusive playground with the life skills class. Now, Miss Buckner's fourth grade class, and she's here tonight, and Miss Cubillas's life skills special education class had a unique additional opportunity as part of their deep learning project. So the organization Edutopia, who makes worldwide educational videos about best teaching practices, and the organization Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration, who develops inclusive playgrounds, actually selected McKinley to make a worldwide video about inclusion. So the goal of the video is to share with the world the power of social inclusion and the value of children of all abilities playing together. So for this video, our students and staff were filmed during an initial workshop with Shane's Inspiration where they learned all about disabilities. Then on a field trip to a Shane's Inspiration inclusive playground where they played with their buddies from the life skills class. And then on a post-field trip discussion, and then in individual interviews. And this has been something I've been working with these organizations since January, so over a year. So we're very excited that this came to fruition actually Monday and Tuesday. So the video itself won't be done for about a month, but I've created a short video to show you sort of the behind the scenes of the filming this week. And I just whipped this together yesterday. And Sarah, there'll be sound on it too. Thank you. So now I have Miss Buckner here, who is the fourth grade teacher of that class, to share a few words.
So as Dr. Benjamin mentioned, part of deep learning is making different connections with different community organizations, and it was such a pleasure and an honor to get a chance to work with Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration and also the people at Edutopia. I know for my fourth graders, they do have a lot of interaction with students who are in our life skills class at our school, just by nature of the strong integration work that we do here at McKinley. That being said, there's a lot of trepidation going in working with a kid who may be your age, but is very, very different from yourself. So we did a lot of preparatory work to make sure that students felt comfortable with kind of knowing what they can say, what they can do. And the folks at Shane's Inspiration were so wonderful and so welcoming with really, really helping us and the students to feel as comfortable as possible. And once they got on the playground, you could still see there was some hesitancy. And as the day went on, just those barriers broke down. Students in my general education class made concerted efforts to learn different sign language signs that students in the life skills class were familiar with, or understand what the different physical needs were that different students had, or what tactile desires they might have, in order to really create an experience that was cultivated for their buddies in the life skills classes. And those of you who are familiar with fourth graders, you know that oftentimes it's hard to see outside of oneself. And as the day went on, they really more and more just tried to get to know their buddies and really began to see them as more than just a person who had a disability who they've maybe seen on campus, but grew very attached to and appreciative of. And in the days since the field trip, the students have been talking nonstop about their buddies and how much they miss them despite being just on the other side of campus, and just seeing their faces light up at recess these past couple days when they've seen their buddies has been a huge deal. So we're really looking forward as a class to continuing to partner with Inclusion Matters by Shane's Inspiration and continuing this deep learning about how we as fourth graders can help make McKinley and the world at large, our community, a more inclusive place. So I'm very appreciative of the opportunities that Dr. Benjamin and the Deep Learning Program has afforded to our fourth graders, and I am really looking forward to seeing how they change the world to make it more inclusive.
Yes, so overall it was just such a heartwarming, wonderful experience, and we feel so lucky to have been selected by Edutopia and Shane's Inspiration for this honor and opportunity. So we look forward to our students being role models and spokespeople for inclusion for the world. So video coming soon. And thank you SMMUSD for supporting us and all of our endeavors in supporting inclusivity. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have only Ms. Buckner's here with us tonight?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, lady.
So we have two certificates for our teachers, of Katie Buckner and Kaylee Kabilas. So you guys want to go take a picture down there with them?
Yeah, so Acting Vice President De La Torre will read the resolution.
Yes, so this resolution recognizing National Inclusive Schools Week. There's a lot of great whereas, but I'm just going to go straight to the resolves. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Santa Monica Malibu Board of Education recognizes the week of December 2nd to the 6th, 2019 as National Inclusive Schools Week and celebrating the theme, Charting the Course for Inclusive Schools, which provides educators, students, parents, schools, agencies, and communities with the opportunity to think about our current philosophies and practices regarding inclusion, and to plan for next steps in the process. And therefore be resolved that this special week serves as a fitting time for educators, students, and parents in schools and classrooms in the Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District to celebrate progress in providing a supportive and quality education to all students, to discuss what else needs to be done to ensure continuing improvement in inclusive practices, including consideration of the accessibility of electronic resources and information technology to promote student achievement, and to organize appropriate school and community activities in recognition of National Inclusive Schools Week.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? I see Mr. Metcher, and we'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Afshar?
Yes.
Mr. Metcher? Yes. Ms. Lana Vasquez?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberman?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. De La Torre?
Yes.
And I am a yes. That is 6 yeses. For our next item, which is the approval of our district calendars, we will turn to Dr. Drotti. Before we get to Dr. Drotti and the calendars, we will go to our discussion item, Santa Monica Ed Foundation Quarterly Report to the Board of Education.
I'll see you after the item.
And Linda, we've made an announcement earlier in the meeting that the microphones are sensitive tonight, as are most of the board members. You still have to turn it on. That's the first step. They're not that sensitive. Put the candle back.
So I just want to say that my life before this life as a fundraiser was in special ed, and it is so, so exciting to see the inclusivity efforts going on. I found that really thrilling. Anyway, our quarterly report to the board. So life from about the middle of July to the end of December is just a whirlwind for us. We had a strong start of the school year that has kind of been unending since then, and we work during the summer with our 3 middle schools who do online registrations. So we had a huge response in those first month and a half of school, and as of August 31st, we raised as of 10/31, we raised $1.45 million. So that's how much we've raised towards our grant. We're pretty happy about that. It's about 3.5% of where we were last year at that time. So we're doing a little bit better. This slide shows how much we've raised from parents as of October 31st and where we ended last year with parent donations. So we are about 1.5% in our parent participation numbers. Staff participation remains steady as compared to last year, with 28% of staff participating both this year and last year at this time. We continue to build our 2 major donor giving circles. As of November 15th of this year, we've raised almost $400,000 from 71 superintendent circle members, and we ended last year with a total raised of $661 from 93 soup circle members. So you can see that we're growing that as well, and that's been really both a result of outreach from our staff as well as current soup circle members reaching out and finding other people that want to give at that level. So that's been really exciting. Our leadership circle has donated a collective $182,000 from 69 donors again, and then we ended last year at $226,000. So we're on track to do hopefully better than we did last year with the leadership circle. We've raised a total of $185,000 from 19 corporate partners so far this year. We have some big matching gifts planned and therefore expect to see more growth in the Corporate Heroes program. If you remember, every year we tell you that our all of our events are in the spring, so that's when we really get a lot of our corporate partners to join us, but it's really great that some of the ones that have been contributing all along are just renewing automatically. Pledge Days. So we have a focused campaign called Pledge Days, and this year it happened a little later in the year, about 3 weeks later than usual. And this fundraising drive has historically bookended the start of school, but because back to school nights were a little later, and we moved Pledge Days to about a month later. We had 333 donors give a total of $113,000, which was great. We didn't have a big match for Pledge Days like we did last year, but we did have two wonderful flash matches from Diane Doran of Compass Realty and David Yoon from the 88 Group. So as I said, we go full force till the end of December with our calendar year-end campaign. And then, as you know, our parent campaign ends at the end of January. Renewals are our biggest focus right now. This group of last year's donors represents over $900,000 of renewable income for the foundation. So we are spending a lot of time. In fact, I was a little late coming up here because I was writing notes on our gratitude report, which we send out to our donors at this time. We continue a focus on our TK and kindergarten families as they settle into the school district because we just kind of want to get them into the habit of giving. And if they start early and continue throughout their time at SMMUSD, that would be fabulous. We've had a couple of parent hosted get-togethers. We had one at Roosevelt and one for Grant Elementary School. And really, it's a wonderful way for the principal and the Ed Foundation board members from those schools and the community to just understand how we support the school district through our PTA partnership and the Ed Foundation partnership. In just a week and a half from now, we have Giving Tuesday, which is a national day of giving, and we take advantage of that and send out a lot of emails. I'm sure you'll be getting them, reminding everybody this is just a great day to give. And then we roll right into our January campaign, which is we'll be reminding our non-donors at that time that we have until January 31st to give, and that'll be the end of our parent campaign. So, as I said before, we have in the spring we have our events. I'm going to come back to the retiree event for a minute, and tell you that on January 25th we do have a For the Arts concert planned at Barnum Hall. Can't mention who we have as headliners yet because they're being confirmed hopefully this week, but I'm pretty excited. And then we do have a date for our wine auction at the Fairmont Miramar Hotel on May 3rd. I want to take a minute just to tell you about the retiree event because it was the first time that we had an event for Santa Monica retirees, and we had 75 people show up, and I think Ben, you were there, and Sarah and Chris, you were there. It was, in my opinion, amazing. All of these people were part of the SMMUSD family, and I think as I think about retiring sometime in the near future, I think about how weird it's going to be to kind of leave one day and just not have any contact with anybody. So we planned this event, and I think our oldest retiree there was 90. She was amazing, but all of them were so happy to be there. It was like a fabulous reunion, and I have heard from almost every one of them saying, "What's the date for next year?" They are looking forward to it, and they've started donating to the foundation just as a result of that one little get-together. And then the other day, we needed some volunteers for a mailing we were doing, and 6 of them came in to hand address some envelopes and to fold some newsletters, and they were having a great time. So I think it's a really wonderful way to re-engage people who used to work for the district, and I'm looking forward to making it an annual event. Thank you.
Do we have any questions, Maria?
No, just a thank you. As always, thank you so much, Linda, for leading the charge and your staff. It's
great.
Wonderful. I just had a question, Dr. Duarte. Are we going to get a similar report from the Malibu Foundation, or what the status is on that?
Yes, so I actually had a meeting with some parents in Malibu last Friday or something, so they were talking about in the process of adopting a mission statement and just getting really lined up. So I mentioned to them about the cycle of reporting, so they know it. So we're still going to solidify a date where they can come and give us a presentation of where they are. So I'll keep you posted on that.
Anyone else? Comments, questions? Lori?
I just echo Maria's gratitude for you and all your staff and how hard you worked. And so just to just to bother you about this. When will we know who's performing at the January 25th?
I have a special concert list, Lori, an email that'll be going out, hopefully, if not right before Thanksgiving, right after. Okay? It's coming up soon, I know.
Springsteen. It is coming up soon, and obviously there'll be people distracted by all the holidays and all of that.
Right.
So, because we have never done it.
That early, I
January.
know. It was a request from our music teachers up at SAMO. They, usually we have it right around Stairway, and it's
Yeah.
just a lot for the kids to.
I don't think it's a problem at all.
Yeah.
It's just a question
It'll make a
of
great holiday
reorienting our
gift.
advertising.
Oscar has a question?
Thank you, Linda, for
Sure.
all your work and your staff as well. Just a quick question. I saw that you've had a lot of success in increasing the number of donors pretty much all across the board, but very interesting to see the growth in our parents giving more. And I just a quick question, like what are some of the strategies what changed? Is this that?
I think it's people, honestly, it's people getting used to that that giving is a culture and they need to support the programs, and if they don't, we won't have the programs.
That's
I mean, that's worrisome to a lot of people. And there, again, I can't reiterate enough the amazing partnership we have with our PTAs. We have Ed Foundation chair people at every school in Santa Monica, and they really help us get the word out. When we go out to schools, they're at the tables with us so that there's a friendly, known face at the table, because we're not at the school sites all the time, but the parents are. So more and more people are just getting used to it and are happy that they can help support the schools.
One other question
Sure.
that I had, in terms of targeted fundraising for specific student populations, like I know we have some money that's allocated for music, for example, that the Ed Foundation manages. Would it be appropriate to do something, specifically for like homeless students? I heard a statistic that we have about 70 plus students that are homeless enrolled in our school district, like 70. Yeah, I don't know if that's accurate, but it is about that much. Yeah. So about 70 plus students. And I just, it's been on my mind a lot, thinking about how we can do something targeted, specific for that student population.
Right.
And maybe that would, like a story around that would probably generate a lot of giving, from our parents, or more giving.
So up until now, we've I want to call them, we've done one-offs for that population. They do get to participate in all the programs that we fund for the kids. So 30 weeks of arts education in elementary school, they participate. But in addition, we have some grant money from the Hughes Foundation, the Aurora Foundation, the Assistance League, specifically for homeless and foster youth. And we work with student services to do that, to fund certain things for those students. We also had a request last year from Olympic to help fund a food pantry. And so I found a donor to give $5,000 to begin, stocking that food pantry. So I get a lot of one-off requests that I also kind of go and find a donor for, but we don't, as you suggested, really promote that because it's not officially part of the annual fund programs that we've been given the charge to raise money for.
Anyone else? Thank you very much, Linda.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And now we will go to Dr. Dradi with approval of the 3 years of calendars.
So as you know, it is a practice of our district for the board to approve calendars 3 years in advance. So the last 3 years ends this year, so we need to adopt the calendar for the next 3 years. And normally the process takes a committee coming together, of staff coming together to negotiate and talk about where the vacations are and so on. So Mark Kelly led that process very successfully. He tells me it's not an easy process, but he was able to succeed in it. And so what you see before you here are the calendars that are being processed already, but we do need it to get adopted so we can post it and allow our families to start planning.
Your question?
So my question, it turns out it was wonderful that I raised it in the wrong time because we got an answer to it. And in fact, I will spare you all what the answer is, but suffice to say, It actually does make sense the way it is, so it's not a typo. I'm happy. It all worked out. You trust me?
Thank you for that, sir.
You do not want to know. And I'll
Would you like to move the item?
Yep.
Craig has made a motion to approve. Ralph is second. Any more discussion on the item?
I've been talking to some students, and one of the issues that came up, and we've talked about it in the past, and I know Board Member Leon Vasquez brought it up as well, regarding Cesar Chavez Day, to recognize that on the calendar. And, I know it's difficult to get some time off, and all that, but we should find a way to acknowledge that, that very important holiday. I see also that, I think so, but I was looking at the calendar for 2020-21, and is it right to say that we are in recess on March 31st in 2021? Is that am I reading it right? It says school recess, classes not in session, correct? Spring break, yeah. Yeah, that's during spring break. And then the following year, though, that isn't the case. So maybe we can figure out how to do it, because it's like there's not, even with the approval today, there isn't consistency in terms of how that can play out. But if we can even advocate for a day of service, if we are in school. If we're not in school, then that is the way it is. But if there's a way to just recognize that as a day of service at a minimum, I think that would be good for us. So just want to plant that out there and plant the seed and get that going, so that staff can think about it and come back with a recommendation for future calendars.
Thank you. Maria, then Lori.
I guess my question would be, is that official state, it's a state holiday, not a federal, but a state holiday? So that, is it something that then does the school district get reimbursed for that day? Is it an official or not? Or is it like one of those days like admissions day in the beginning that we negotiate the day off?
It'll be one of those days we will have to negotiate as a holiday, just as we do with some of the Jewish holidays that we have. Or what we call it, local holidays. So we can. That's up to us. That's up to our discretion. Just note that any additional day is a cost. So that's something. Any additional day is a cost. So that's something we would have to agree to add.
Yeah, but
unless we're replacing it with another local holiday.
But my question was, what a great system we got, right? Is it a day that we already, in other words, we get paid for that day? So it wouldn't be an additional cost then? Do we keep? That's what I'm just trying to clarify. Yeah. Paid holiday.
We observe it, but it's not we don't take it off as a holiday. And if we wanted it to get to that status, it would have to be negotiated and either replaced. We would have to replace a different day, or it would be a cost, as Dr. Drati just said. Mine isn't as, well, maybe it is. Maybe
Did you have something
I did. All I wanted to do is say to anyone who might be watching this and not looking at the calendars that the biggest change from prior years that's reflected in these 3 years is that we will now be experimenting with taking having the Wednesday off prior to Thanksgiving, which we have not done before, and in lieu of that day, a day has been added on to the end of every calendar year.
That out? Oscar, is there something to add?
Just if we can, maybe even not, if we're not ready, obviously, to move forward on a holiday for Cesar Chavez, that we recognize it in the calendar as a day of service. So it's not listed as a holiday, but as a day of service, maybe, just so we acknowledge it on the calendar. Because I know we do this in the school district, but it'd be great to have it recognized somehow in the calendar, officially.
Let's do a quick poll of the board here. Would the board be okay with giving direction to staff to look into this to see what the realities of that would be? Is this something that's, because we're trying to make sure we have 4 people, is this something we want to give direction to staff to look into?
Can I amend it a little bit? I would say that there are also probably a few other days that we treat similarly. We don't, at this point, take them off as a holiday, but we do recognize them. And they're also, I think, meaningful. So I would say if staff wanted to take a look at how might we address those days that we do observe and want people to know we recognize, but are not at this point anyway, holidays, if they could take a look at that, I think that would be
And
good.
Oscar, are you implying, when you say day of service, are you implying that we're recognizing that this is a holiday on this day, even though we are in school and doing our routines? So you want people to take a moment to reflect on that day?
Yeah, correct. I mean, I'm not so big on taking the day off. I think that it'd be more appropriate for us to take a day on to do something to engage, especially now that we're about social justice standards. That it would be appropriate, to have that in the curriculum where there's, like they're doing in McKinley, for example, service, something special that's recognized in our school district as a service day.
Okay, Maria?
No, I agree with that. I guess it's just to add on to that, is that the day of service, it would be something that the teachers could integrate into the curriculum for that day so that it could be like an activity or something planned ahead of time so that they could, as part of the, their learning experience for the day.
So why don't we do this then? Why don't we give direction to staff to look into Cesar Chavez Day, and do we want to identify other days that fit into this?
I think I have a suggestion on that. So we do throughout the year a number of proclamations in honor of a series of people and groups of people. And I think it would be interesting to use that as our touching off point, because one of the things that's always struck me is we have this proclamation and there's very little practical follow-up. So if we were to note this on a calendar for all of these recognitions that we do, and that becomes a thought provoker for our campuses to say, is there a special project you want to circle around this and around that and whatever's particularly meaningful on that campus or for
It
those
looks like
teachers.
Sarah has a question or wants to address this.
So when the board does adopt those proclamations, Fred Korematsu and the other individuals, we
Dolores Huerta.
yeah, they were, sorry. We do send the signed proclamations to the principals the day immediately following a board meeting and adoption, and we encourage the principals to share that information with their staff. Many times the principals are already aware because you have been adopting these annually, and so they will share them with the staff and encourage them to, as you say, incorporate it into the curriculum and do projects, meaningful projects that are grade appropriate and things like that. But we do share that with the principals and encourage them to share it with their staff.
Okay, I think just, let's try to move it. Let me try to close this up and see if we can move on. I think what the board is saying is that it would be nice if on our master calendar, we recognize these days so that families who might not be aware of what's happening in school are aware that, hey, the 31st is Cesar Chavez Day, this is Fred Korematsu Day. If we could ask staff to look into what that procedure would be and what possibilities we have. Yes,
The only thing I want to add is, I don't think it necessarily has to be in, you could do another calendar on top, an overlay calendar, if you will, because if it doesn't work to do it on here because it mucks up what this calendar does, which is really tell you days in and days out. And you got to go to school or you don't got to go to school. I'm just saying, there should be flexibility. We don't mean it has to be done this way.
We're just saying, can you get back to us and let us know whether it's Mary Ann, whether it's some other
I just
form?
didn't want them to
Let's
feel
let them come back
hemmed in.
to us with ideas. We have a motion, we have a second. Can we, if we can move to approve, take roll call vote. Ms. Afshar?
Yes.
Mr. Metcher?
Yes.
Ms. Land Vasquez? Ms. Lieberman?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. De La Torre?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That is 6 yeses. And we approve the calendars in case we've forgotten what we had been talking about. All right. Brings us to our final action item, which is the budget revisions. I believe Gerardo is going to lead this discussion. Mr. Cruz.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gerardo Cruz, your Director of Fiscal Services, and I'll be presenting your first budget revision. Just a reminder that you do have 3 budget revisions throughout the year. directly before your interim periods. So we'll be back here probably 2 other times in the near future. So just as a recap, these are really hot mics. Your first revision shows the district's financial position up through October 31st. And what that does is that compares the adopted budget to your first revision, and then it shows the change in between the 2 periods. And that's always before your first interim that you always approve in December. So what this outlines is the general fund activity so far throughout the current year, and then you will approve these board budget adoptions as well, budget adjustments, excuse me. So today we're going to start backwards. We usually start with our general fund, but I thought I'd throw you for a loop and start with the other funds first. So we'll start with Fund 71. This is your retiree OPEB trust fund account. So this is our unfunded liability for all of our retirees that retire. The state, as a statewide, has an unfunded liability for all its retirees, and this is our fund that we keep to ensure that we continue to be able to fund our retirees into the future. And just so you know, you can see from the slide that there was no change since you adopted the budget back in June. So we started the fiscal year with the same budget as we are now approving in the first first budget revision. We also have your Fund 51, your bond interest and redemption fund. This fund is tied to our Fund 21, which is our building fund. That's all of our bonds, our Measure BB, Measure ES, our new Measure SMS and M. So this is all the interest attached to those accounts. And you can see, you're probably wondering, well, we see that it was adopted with something totally different than where we are now. And that's very standard for this particular fund because we at the district don't have control over this fund. This fund is actually managed by our County Office of Education, so that's LACO. So remember, we always adopt our budget very early. We do a preliminary budget to you in May, and so the county doesn't always have, or never have, they never have their budget for the new year for the fund ready until actually in September. So we are required to adopt the Fund 51 with the prior year budget, and then we always know that in the first budget revision we make the changes into the new budget. So that's why that has a lot of change for that particular fund. Fund 40, this is your special reserve for capital outlay. This happens to be one of the funds that you have for all capital projects. There was quite a bit of change here. You can see that for our revenue and expenditures, there was a decrease of 3.225 million. And what that is basically showing is that, remember, yet again, we adopted our budget back in May, a preliminary budget. At the time we adopted that, we anticipated that we were not going to expend all the Prop 39 funds, and we anticipated that we would have to carry those funds into the new year to utilize them. Well, Carrie Upton's team did a very good job in completing all the projects on time in the 2 months of May and June. So the Prop 39 funds were fully expended in the 2 months from when you adopted your budget back in May. So that required us to make a budget adjustment this year, showing that we needed to reduce that budget because it's already spent, and that's what those shows in the first revision. This account also holds last year you allocated around $700,000 to capital projects related to food services equipment. So this is where that money is kept as well for the food services department. Just as a side note, you allocated $700. They spent about $200 in the year 18-19, which obviously leaves them roughly about $500 in the new year to spend on capital projects and equipment related to food services. Fund 25, this is your capital facilities funds. This is also where your developer fees pass through, just so you're aware. And for the community, developer fees are collected at any time a developer does any building in the city of Santa Monica. They pay a portion, in Santa Monica and Malibu, they pay a portion to the city and a portion to the school district. And so this is how this is how we get revenue for this particular fund. Just as a point of reference, this particular fund is, I would say, extremely low. $2.3 million is not a lot. We've used this fund over the last several years a lot. In the year 12-13, we had a fund balance for this particular fund of almost $10 million. It was around 9.6. Then we encountered our concerns with PCBs in the Malibu communities, and when we spoke to our legal counsel and our auditors, we asked them, where does all this money come from? You know, how do we pay for all these things? And they said Fund 25 was the appropriate fund to pay for all of the environmental issues we're having, as well as our natural disasters that we have. So not only did this go to PCBs, it also, last year, the fires, a majority of the expenditures were coming out of this fund as well. So we're down to $2.3 million. And just as another point of reference, I believe one of the questions that were asked before is how much does this particular fund bring in revenue annually? We did a 3-year average, Carrie Upton and I, to make sure that we had the correct amount of average revenue coming in. It's in around $1.7 million per year that we collect in developer fees. Carrie Upton and myself are also, and Melody, are also in the process of increasing our developer fees. And that's a very long process. It involves working with the education services side of the house to make sure we have all of our education specifications in order, the square foot per child, and then our enrollment as well. So we hope to be bringing you an item in the near future, or far future, related to increasing our developer fees. Fund 21, this is the fund that I mentioned to you that coincides with Fund 51. Fund 21 is where all of our measures for our bonds expenditure and revenue live. You can see that they're referenced BB, ES, SMS, and M. You will see a breakdown of every fund and its individual series in the first interim in December. So while this is a roll-up, all of the detail will be presented to you at the first interim in December. Fund 14, this is your deferred maintenance fund. There's been no change since the adoption. And just for another point of reference, that last year your deferred maintenance fund was adopted at $1.5 million. As you well know, there was a change when we adopted the budget in the new year to that total being $750, and there's been no change since we adopted the budget. Moving on to Fund 13, this is your food services account, the cafeteria special fund. Food services has been doing very good in reducing the contribution that we gave them for last year. This year you see a $900,000 contribution. It says interfund transfer. That's from the general fund to the food services fund. Last year, they were allocated that same amount, and they did really good by only using $560,000 of that. We know that a lot of that was offset by the catering, the new food programs that have been coming to you, and Richard Marchini, our Director of Food Services, has been updating you on that. So all those works look to be paying off. So we hope that continue. And if you can see here in the first revision that we're actually increasing $19,000 to the fund balance. On the next slide, it's just detailed what that $19,000 consists of. You have salary adjustments, benefit adjustments, as well as supplies as well. Moving on to your child development fund. This is another program that has been doing very good over the last couple of years. You'll notice that you have a very big beginning balance of $1.3 million. And if you go to the next page, we can see that the program itself has had an increase in state preschool revenue, as well as an increase in the full fee program. That's specifically the school age program and the full fee parent program. So that program has been doing very good for the entire fund as a whole. You do have to remember that within child development, there are several pots. There's state preschool, there used to be Head Start, there is the full fee program, there's ITC. So while there are many facets within the fund as a whole does self-sustain itself. If we focus on to the salary and benefit adjustments, you can see what those are, but I will take your eye down to the $176,000 increases in services and other operating costs. It was important for us to delineate out what those are for you so that you could see what that larger number consists of, and those are listed there for you. Yes? Board Member Foster.
So we had made a change in CDS with regard to Head Start with the expectation that that would be a drag on the budget. And I don't see that here. Is it because it hasn't happened or because it's something? So yeah, can you explain that?
Yes, that's a very good question. If we go back here to the number slide, so I mentioned that 1.3 million was their beginning balance. That was as of 18-19. That was prior to the $1 million coming into the preschool portion of child development. So they have, prior to that $1 million being allocated to them on their own, they have a beginning balance of 1.3. If you go down to the interfund transfer sections where it says interfund transfer from Fund 1, that 1.2 is what's the board decided to allocate. We remember that 1 million is from the general fund, 200 is from Dr. Mora's education services LCAP supplemental portion. And so this puts them in a very good position to be successful. So the point is, you're correct. Prior to you allocating those particular funds, they put themselves in a good position prior to that. Any other questions on child development? Moving to Fund 11, this is your adult education fund. There's just very regular routine adjustments here. There's mostly related to employee salary and benefits. If we go down here, we can see that the largest item is a $59,000 adjustment. That was mostly to their general supplies, and they were drawing down on their own fund balance, which is appropriate. They can do that. So they found operational needs that they needed to put in supplies. Any questions on Fund 11? Adult school. Moving on to the general fund. This one is a very busy one, and all the numbers look a lot, but we'll go to the summary page and we'll hit the highlights unless you have specific questions. We see that the revenues increased $187,000 for our MA program. That's the Medi-Cal program that's mostly run through federal funding. We also had an increase in our interest earned. So this is primarily due, and I know we'll speak to this a little bit later, that's primarily due to the amount of cash that we borrowed. When we borrow cash, that's through the tax revenue anticipation note, also known as the TRANS. When we have a large amount of money that we borrowed to make sure that we have ample cash, we get to earn interest on that, which is allowable by IRS guidelines. It's just a certain threshold. So that 153 of interest earned is mostly due to our available cash that we now have thanks to our TRANS. And then we had a decrease. We have to commend our special education department for decreasing the local general fund contribution that we normally give to them. They decreased that about $261, and it's mostly due to saved salaries from vacant positions. They do have a tougher time filling paraeducator positions and as well as teaching positions. So that increased was a credit to our revenue by $261. We have expenditures. I will say that the increase in certificated salaries of $21,000, this is a little misleading because one thing that we do have to keep in mind is that when we're adjusting the budget for the first interim, lots of ins and outs are going on. So we have a $200,000 credit, a $300,000 debit. So this doesn't mean that, oh great, we were spot on our budget. We only made one $21,000 adjustment. That's not the case. We have several adjustments that just happen to net to, well, not happen, that sounds bad. They don't happen to net, but they only net to a $21,000 adjustment. Just know that several adjustments happen throughout the year. So when you have that type of adjustments, you also have the corresponding benefits that occur, as well as we made adjustments to our books and supplies. One of the larger pieces on here that I know that has caught the eye of several people is the $1.5 million increase to other operating costs. And the majority of that is due to the cost of us offering the retirement incentive, that was the SERP. Remember that we offer a retirement incentive, but the district does have to pay a fee for that. $975,000 of that is the annuity. So that does go to, I believe it's Omaha of Washington. Yeah, I think so. For the annuity of $975. And then, of course, Keenan, who conducted our retirement incentive, is owed a fee as well for their services. So those pieces together are about $1 million. In your unaudited actuals presentation that you had back in September, you saw this amount, but it wasn't an expenditure item. It was down at the below, far at the bottom as a reserve for expenditure item. It was across all 5 years, and it was in the reserve section of your budget in the unaudited actuals. Now that the first revision is here, it's time to bring that expenditure up to the expenditure section of your budget so that you can plan for it. And this is planned for this year as well as the 4 years out. Any questions specifically on the retirement incentive before I move on?
It seems like this is an expense that I don't mean this at all as a criticism, I'm just trying to understand. It seems like this could have been in the budget before now. I mean, it was in the budget, I understand that you had it as a reserve, but given that we knew it was coming, why is it moving into the main body today as opposed to when we put the budget together?
That's a very great question. So again, it's back to the timing I alluded to 2 other times already, that we adopt our budget back in May. We don't have the final numbers for this type of thing when we met with Keenan until the very end of June. So we did make a judgment call. Do we throw in any number and kind of guess and hope it works? We did ask Keenan what they suggested of us. They said, it's up to us. And so we did decide that it was better to, put in the number once we knew what it was. Very good question. Any other questions related to the retirement incentive?
Would it next, Mr. Foster, would it help if we were more explicit in explaining that, be aware that something is coming, just so that we're knowledgeable of it?
I mean, I had the same question and talked to him, and I mean, our interest is knowing our bottom line. We're always looking at that. So, because as I understand it from talking to Gerardo, it certainly would make sense to put it above the line, not below, but it is there, and being in the restricted fund, it's not monies that are ending balance and other future expenditures that we look at. It's different. I mean, if it could be above the line, it would help. So, we don't like to see, none of us like to see, the $1 million item all of a sudden just pop up in a revision.
So just for clarification, it is in the unrestricted budget, but I think you're referring to the reserve that is reserved for other expenditures, not in the regular expenditure budget. So it is reserved at the bottom of our budget.
So, this doesn't change our proximity to any of the threshold levels that we look at.
Correct.
But I think in terms of how you would do this in the future, and I don't know that it's the board's prerogative to intrude on this, but as a suggestion, I'm counting at least 3 people who are saying we would rather have had you guess with an asterisk that it's a guess in the body of the budget rather than reserve it, because we do think of those reserve numbers in a different way than we think of the expenditure numbers. But again, that's only 3, so.
Perfect. And that's what we will do the next time we offer an incentive, because now we know what this amount is for the next 4 years. There is no guessing. So when the next incentive comes around in 10 years, that will be something that we'll actually do. Thank you for the suggestion.
I think it might be a factor of we have timing where we have to put 3 years to LACO, and I just think the more openness, the more our budget reflects as much reality as we can, the better off we are, especially in times like this where we are going to have some hard discussions. So the more reality, the better.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding the incentive? Okay, moving on. We have Another portion of that 1.5 million is 388,000 for the operating costs. This is primarily all of the consultants and the legal fees that we have for the district. So while that may say other operating costs, those are the key components of that particular piece. We also have the 54,000 for conference and travel, and then again, other operating costs that are all rolled up. You see in the parentheses what those are. The next piece is the 888,000 for the cost of the issuance for our trans. Again, this is the tax revenue anticipation note, and for the public, those who don't know, this is where we are borrowing from future tax revenue in anticipation that we'll be able to pay it back with the amount of revenue that we collected. And this particular amount was vetted through our Financial Oversight Committee, and we worked with the borrower from LACO. There are lots of agencies that we can use to borrow to make sure that we have enough cash to last us throughout the year. And if we recall, the reason why we did this trans, just for the community, is that we were going to be short cash in the month of December. So we opted to borrow the 24 million. Questions related to the trans?
Do it, or should I?
I have, I'll do mine, and I'll do one, and then you do the other one, because I know. So the first one is, we sort of skipped past it, but the conference and travel, and then the other operating. Were those also, was there a conference and travel number in the budget prior to, I could just look back the page, but let me just say my concern is, it seems like when we're in an environment, I mean, this is kind of from my former life in business, but when we're in an environment where we're intending to dramatically cut our budget, you would not typically add $54,000 to conference and travel. That would be we're freezing the level of those sorts of discretionary expenditures. So I'll just look. It's easier to ask you.
So the short answer is yes. So there was for all departments and all locations in the district, there was an initial conference and travel budget for everyone. So this particular amount is above and beyond that. There have been instances in prior years where we have done hard stops on conference and travel, to where no one would have conference and travel without the expressed approval executive cabinet. That had been done in the prior past when we were going to the budget reductions of 2008, but that is absolutely something that we can consider.
I think obviously we're going to have a lot of conversation around how we manage our budget going forward. There's going to be some not only areas where we can save, but our culture and our policies of like travel and the type of professional learning, all those things have to be up for discussion. So this will be one of those conversations we'll have to have.
So as part of, I think it's very important that we show our attention to detail here. So it sounds like what Gerardo said would be a great way to respond to this, which is to not freeze it, which is an arbitrary thing to do, but maybe to say that all of the travel that would, like 2008, would be approved, and that way we have a level of scrutiny on it, because we have lots of things to do. I understand why we want to go to conferences and stuff, but maybe you might want to put an additional layer of approval on that to make sure that that's all going in focused directions. And Sean,
I'll just say that the important piece of all of this has to be where we involve the community in these conversations, because sometimes when you make some of these hard decisions, people don't understand and they get frustrated, and so that's why my going out to the sites, my going out to the PTAs and talking to everybody about where we are, so that we're all on the same page when we do make some of these decisions.
And then I'll get to Ralph. Just a quick bit of background on the trans. The reason for this is a lower fund balance, and the fact that now we're basic aid, we get our money at a different timing schedule than we had in the past, which leaves us in need of this short-term borrowing. So that's another unintended consequence of basic aidness.
And to add to it, so we don't get money when we need it, so we have to borrow against the future cash flow, which means that whatever we are getting, we get $353,750 $1,000 less than whatever that number would have been, which in part is because our budget surplus has been drawn down, because if we had a bigger budget surplus, we could lend ourselves the money.
Correct.
But that's just a flat out, it's like a payday borrowing scheme. You know, you're trying to get through to payday and you pay, in this case, not usurious rates. The rates are actually fairly small, but it's a big amount of money.
Correct.
So this is just wasted money. And it's mostly we can hold the state accountable because we don't get the money to run our school district until long after we need the money to run our school district. But this is just, there's nothing, we didn't do anything wrong, but the
Correct.
system, it's just not cool.
Unfortunately, this particular piece is the cost of doing business for our particular situation. Ralph?
Yeah, and I agree with all of that said. So are the conference and travel and operating cost increases just due to it being the beginning of the school year, or would we see these kinds of increases coming typically again when we do this again, second revision and third revision?
Their answer is we don't know that, because there could be people that in departments at school sites that choose to move particular budgets from salaries to conference and travel. They can decide, I don't need this supply money, so I'm going to move it to conference and travel. So it's likely that conference and travel could increase, but the hope is that you're decreasing somewhere else. But there should be no instances where we are drawing down the fund balance simply to add to conference and travel.
So in this case, are you saying that although we have these increases, we're just transferring money from within the budget that we approved at the end of June?
I'm very confident that those were transfers and not increasing and not drawing down of fund balance simply for conference and travel.
These are staff making decisions of using money in a particular way, not increasing, which is good to know and important.
And that's a great point, because this is the purpose of this first budget revision meeting, is for you to ratify all of the operational transfers that we as your financial staff have done for you throughout the year so that operations can continue. So when there are drawdowns of the fund balance, those come to you in a different format.
Dr. Drotti, and then we can move on to the next slide.
And I just want to reiterate something Craig said. We will always be in a situation where we're borrowing money against ourselves, as if we're in a payday type of loans. Those only occur when you're strapped for money and you have to pay the bills. I guess what I want to say is, not only a part of aligning our budget is to establishing a reserve. Okay, that's the only way you get out of that situation. So I'm saying this because that'll be a part of the conversation we have in the next 2 years.
That's correct. In your first interim that you'll see next month, it always asks for a 2-year cash flow, and you'll see yet again next year we will be required to borrow cash.
Can I, Jared, let me ask you a question. In past years, so, because we've been doing trans for many years.
Correct.
For lesser amounts.
Correct.
Because the state, is that when the state was having its budget and they deferred that payment to the next year?
That's correct. The difference here is that we are now borrowing $24 million, and in those years past, we were doing $5 million, $7 million. The max, I think, was 16, 17 was $10 million. So this looks different because it's higher.
But we didn't borrow from ourselves when we had higher reserves.
That's correct. You did not borrow from yourselves. You went through this process.
Would we have been allowed to?
That's correct. If there were other funds like Fund 40, Fund 25 that had enough cash on hand. You saw on the other slides that those other funds like Fund 40, they don't have as much as they did before. So we're not in a position to borrow from ourselves.
When we have higher reserves, we'll discuss whether we want to.
We implicitly borrowed from ourselves when we didn't need to go to the trans. The transes come when they look at their cash flow, which is different than looking at the budget. And
Correct.
They go, we have bills due here, here, and here, and we have revenues here, here, and here, and it don't match up. And then they set up a trans. So many years we've, in 4 months or weeks or whatever, borrowed from ourselves.
Correct.
In case we're getting paid fewer times now as basic aid district, we get paid fewer times than
And
when
later.
we were state aid.
And later.
And later, right.
But you're right, in the day, the state just decided not to pay us on time, and we were forced.
Payments to July to keep it out of.
Yeah.
So the other main giant elephant is that our expenditures are also higher than they were before relative to our revenue. So it's also about our expenditures. Next slide. Moving to the restricted fund, this particular one, I'll jump to the summary page. We can see that we had carryover from our restricted programs, which include all the title programs, as well as an increase in our PTA and booster clubs amount for about $1.4 million. This amount is very standard. One thing that we do have to remember about our restricted fund and our PTAs, the PTAs make commitments to our school sites, and we act as the pass-through in the restricted fund. So this is basically the PTAs saying we're going to commit this much money, and then the sites making those commitments and expenditures. As you can see at the very bottom, there is actually one commitment for $25,000 for shade structure at Grant Elementary. So this is a prime example why that 1.4 is so high, because it's basically being passed through us so the sites can make that expenditures from the PTA. The $1.3 million, this particular one is for, it says books, general supplies, but this is mostly due to textbooks, which we know is mostly from our restricted fund, so that's there for the educational services side of the house. The $762 for other operating costs, those costs are outlined, $310 for consultants and contractors, $308 for other expenses. Again, we see the conference and travel, as well as other operating costs, and those are listed in parentheses as well. Any questions on the restricted fund?
Well, for two comments, and one is to thank you for the report and your accessibility. I know a number of us had questions, and you were there to help explain things.
Of course.
But actually here, the revenue, the first revenue item, the 489,574, talks about carryover from title federal programs. And so Ben, with what we did at the last meeting, had to create a waiver for the Title I. And I know we had some discussion about, are you guys looking at that whole issue, and you're going to bring something back to us fairly soon? So we understand whether we're going to have the same monies, or we have to change our programs or lose those funds.
Dr. Moore, do you want to address that?
So, good evening. The intention is to bring back the information and to be able to share with the board the multi-year projections of our SED students within our Title I schools. How have the demographics shifted? So that's what we will be doing in order to share that. At this point, we're not seeing a significant impact in relationship to the resources and funds we're receiving, but we will see that taking shape at our respective sites, because the numbers are decreasing, as we had shared with you at the previous board meeting. And we will need to engage in a larger conversation around, once we start to look at how are our demographics shifting, and where are the majority of our students when we're thinking about Title I funds, and really providing the resources to where those students are moving and with schools.
Well, the one question is there a point where we lose Title I funds, or we just see a reduction and then we have to reconsider how we use those funds? Or would we just potentially lose them all?
Well, it has to do with the number of students that we have enrolled. So everything is connected. The funding is connected to students, Title I students, so those students who would qualify for those funds, those resources. What we can see is historically the way that we have distributed the funding was with a focus at our elementary sites, right? But as we look at the shifting demographics of our student population, we end up seeing that the enrollment and the number of students that meet this criteria is decreasing, because the threshold is 40%, and as we shared with you before, it's been slowly declining at some of our school sites. That doesn't mean that our students are not here. It means that we need to have a larger conversation around where are our students going, and do we need to really look at how we are identifying the schools that receive these funds? One of the questions that came up at our last meeting was, what are the numbers currently, right? We know that we have one of our middle schools that reaches that threshold, and then we would have to do a deeper study to see what are the numbers at Samo High. They're not at the 40 threshold, but we have to have those conversations, right? Where are the funds in relationship to where the students are and those pockets of needed support?
And when do you think you'll be able to bring that back to us?
So, yes, I shared the numbers, but I know we want to have a larger conversation around where we're at. So probably within the next month or so, Sam Koshi and I are going to be working on those pieces. We're just trying to solidify and validate all of our data so that when we're coming with you, we have concrete numbers to speak to.
I'm only asking, I think the board thinks, why is he asking the questions? We did get the numbers, but we were looking at a certain way by having to have a 40% threshold. If we're not doing that in a number of schools, it changes what the money is spent, and so we need to let the families, the community know that there will be a change in all that, and it'll change things at the schools possibly as well.
No, I agree with you. Any change would require that we engage in a larger conversation, that we have these dialogues with our site leaders, with our families, so that they have an understanding in regards to the why, right? Why do we receive these funds? What are their purpose? Where are the students that benefit from these resources? And what is that threshold? And what are the adjustments that we're going to make, if any, right? If any, that hasn't been made, but those are conversations that we have to have.
Great, thank you. Gerardo?
So just one last point of reference. Earlier I alluded to that the general fund had a decrease in their contribution to special ed, and so at the top of the revenue you see that corresponding amount reflected that 261, because remember the special education piece resides in the restricted fund. One more clarifying question. It can look also a little deceiving under the expenditures section, where we see that there was an increase in certificated salaries for 232. The comment was made that, oh wow, that's the cost of one whole entire teacher. No, that's not particularly true. Again, lots of transfers happen. That just happens to be the summary of a couple of things that were in there. So I'm going to just make sure to point that out. Any questions on restricted general fund? All right, so that takes us to the end. The next time we'll see you is next month for your first interim. The first interim will have all these same budget adjustments. You will see them in your great big SACS format, the state format that we send to you. We'll look at the multi-year projections, which you didn't see here, which is not normally the practice of this particular meeting. It's usually at the first interim and second interim where you see the multi-year projections and the effect on the fund balance, as well as receive board directions on any adjustments that you are requesting. You will also see the audit report, not at the December meeting, but the January 2020 meeting.
Great. We have to accept this report, I assume. So do we have a motion to do so? By Oscar, second by Maria. Roll call vote. Mr. Metcher?
Yes.
Lana Vasquez?
Yes.
Ms. Lieberman?
Yes.
Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. De La Torre?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That's 6 yeses to accept this report as submitted. Thank you, Gerardo. I appreciate that. And that brings us now, we have no information items. Mr. De La Torre, we have one public comment?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, we do have
Feel free to edit that.
one member, one public speaker. And public comments is the time when members of the audience may address the Board of Education on items not scheduled on the meeting's agenda. Pursuant to the Brown Act, board members may not engage in discussion or issues raised during public comment except to ask clarifying questions, make a brief announcement, or make a brief report on their own activities, or refer the matter to staff. So you will, this is 3 minutes, right? And is it Margaret Bennett?
Margot Bennett.
Margaret Bennett. Thank you very much, Ms. Bennett, for being here. We really appreciate your voice.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Margot Bennett, and I'm the Executive Director of Women Against Gun Violence. We are a nonprofit organization working to prevent gun violence in LA County for over 26 years. We are not anti-gun, we are pro-gun safety, and we accomplish our mission through our programs and legislative action. You have been ahead of the pack on gun violence prevention. In 2014, your school district approved the distribution of our TALK project, a safe gun storage information booklet, to all elementary school student households. And we did it. We distributed almost 5,000 brochures to student households available in 4 different languages. Now I'm here to ask you to agendize safe gun storage and the passing of a resolution that would require all Santa Monica Malibu School District schools to send safe gun storage information home to all student households. LA Unified School District passed a resolution in June of this year and has already begun the distribution process. Culver City School District passed a similar resolution just a few weeks ago with implementation to start in 2020. Glendale and Manhattan Beach School Districts have the issue on their December agendas. School safety is of critical importance to most parents. This year, there have already been at least 77 incidents of gunfire on our nation's school grounds, resulting in 14 deaths, including 3 suicides and at least 46 injuries. The majority of school shootings were committed by minors, and where there was knowledge of the gun's origin, 80% of the shooters used a gun he or she obtained from their home or from the home of a relative. We do not have all the details yet from the Saugus school shooting, but it does seem likely that the shooter got the gun from his home. Sending home safe gun storage information is not a reactive measure. It is a preventive measure, much like other preventive measures we take to keep our children safe. Seatbelts, age restrictions on cigarette purchases, driving and texting laws. We recommend that you use a one-page sheet that includes safety issues and legal obligations, make it a sign and return, and get it into the hands of parents, and include the information about California's new safe gun storage law, which has recently been strengthened. Distributing this information would be small but essential step, preventing gun violence and keeping our children safe. We're counting on you, and we're here to help you by drafting a resolution or drafting a one-page notification. We worked closely with LAUSD on their materials. I'll be sending you the required written request. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any board member comments? Then we will adjourn the meeting. Wonderful.
Happy Thanksgiving.